Hey, what's up, party people? It's me, Cheese, and today I am going to tell a story. Yeah. Okie dokie. Once upon a time, you know what? I forget it. I'm just gonna look up a story. I'm bad at telling ghost stories. Do-do-do-do-do-do-do. Ghost stories. Scary. Scary ghost stories. Let's see. Come on, search it. Search it. Mm, okay. Wait, I want to do something. Hmm. 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 Come on. Okay. There's a Missouri ghost story. It's called Rawhead and Bloody Bones. Way back in deep woods, there lived a scrawny old woman who had a reputation for being the best conjuring woman in the Ozarks, whatever that means, with her bedraggled black and gray hair, funny eyes, one yellow and one green, and her crooked nose. Old Betty was not a pretty picture, but she was the best there was at fixing what ailed a man, and that was all that counted. Old Betty's house was full of herbs and roots and bottles filled with conjuring medicine. The walls were lined with strange books brimming with magical spells. Old Betty was the only one living in the hollow who knew how to read. Her granny, who was also a conjurer, had taught her the skill as part of her magical training. Just about the only friend old Betty had was a rough, mean, ugly old razorback hog that ran wild around her place. It rooted so much in her kitchen garbage that all the leftover spells started affecting it. Some folks swore up and down that the old razorback hog sometimes walked upright like a man. One fellow claimed he'd seen the pig sitting in the rocker on old Betty's porch, chattering away to her while she stewed up some potions in the kitchen. But everyone discounted that story on account of the fellow who told it was a little too fond of moonshine. Rawhead was the name old Betty gave the razorback, referring maybe to the way the ugly creature looked a bit like some of the dead pigs come butchering time down in Hog's Scald Hollow. The razorback didn't mind the funny name. Rawhead kept following old Betty round her little cabin and rooting up the kitchen leftovers. He'd even walk to town with her when she came to the local mercantile to sell her home remedies. Well, folks in town got so used to seeing Rawhead and old Betty around the town that it looked mighty strange one day on the hog driving time when old Betty came to the mercantile without him. "Where's Rawhead?" the owner asked as he accepted her basket full of home remedy potions. The liquid in the bottles swished in an agitated manner as old Betty said, "I ain't seen him around today, and I'm mighty worried. You seen him here in town?" "Nobody's seen him around today. They would have told me if they did," the mercantile owner said. "We'll keep a lookout for you." Weird, weird, weird. Okay, where are we? "It's mighty kind of you. If you see him, tell him to come home straight away," old Betty said. The mercantile owner nodded agreement as he handed over her weekly pay. Old Betty fussed herself all the way home. It wasn't like Rawhide to disappear, especially not the day they went to town. The man at the mercantile always saved the best scraps from the mean old Razorback, and Rawhide never missed a visit. When the old conjuring woman got home, she mixed up a potion and poured it onto a flat plate. "Where's that old hog got to?" she asked the liquid. It clouded over, and then a series of pictured forms. First, old Betty saw the good-for-nothing hunter that lived on the next ridge, sneaking round the forest, rounding up Razorback hogs that didn't belong to him. One of the hogs was Rawhide. Then she saw him taking the hogs down to Hog-Scald Hollow, where folks from the next town were slaughtering their Razorbacks. Then she saw her hog Rawhide slaughtered with the rest of the pigs and hung up for gutting. The final picture in the liquid was a pile of bloody bones that had once been her hog, and his scraped clean head lying with the other hog's head in the pile. Old Betty was infuriated by the death of her only friend. It was murder to her, plain and simple. Everyone in 3 counties knew that Rawhide was her old friend, and that lazy, hog-stealing, good-for-nothing hunter was on the ridge, going to pay for slaughtering him. Old Betty tried to practice right conjuring most of the time, but she knew the dark secrets too. She pulled out an old secret book her granny had given her and turned to the very last page. She lit several candles and put them around the plate containing the liquid picture of Rawhide and his bloody bones. Then she began to chant, "Rawhide and bloody bones, Rawhide and bloody bones." The light from the windows disappeared, as if the sun had been snuffed out like a candle. Dark billowed into the clearing where old Betty's cabin stood, and the howl of dark spirits could be heard in the wind that pummeled the treetops. Woo! Ooh, this is a very scary. Ooh. Rawhide and bloody bones, Rawhide and bloody bones. Betty continued the chant until a bolt of silver lightning left the plate and streaked out through the window, heading in the direction of Hog-Scald Hollow. I'm sorry, I don't have any sound effects. These are some only stuff. When the silver light struck Rawhide's severe head, which was piled on the hunter's wagon with the other hog head, it tumbled to the ground and rolled until it was touching the bloody bones that once inhabited his big body. As the hunter's wagon rumbled away toward the ridge where he lived, the enchanted Rawhide called out, "Bloody bones, get up and dance!" Immediately the bloody bones reassembled themselves into a skeleton of a Razorback hog walking upright, as Rawhide had often done when he was alone with old Betty. The head hopped on top of his skeleton, and Rawhide went surging through the woods for weapons to use against the hunter. He borrowed the sharp teeth of a dying panther, the claws of a bone-dead bear, and the tail from a rotting raccoon to put them over his skinned head and bloody bones. Then Rawhide headed up the track toward the ridge, looking for the hunter who had slaughtered him. Rawhide slipped past the thief on the road, slid into the barn where the hunter kept his horse and wagon. Rawhide climbed up into the loft and waited for the hunter to come home. It was dusk when the hunter drove into the barn and unhitched his horse. The horse snorted in fear, sensing the presence of Rawhide in the loft. Wondering It was disturbing. His usually calm horse, the hunter looked around and saw a large pair of eyes staring down at him from the darkness in the loft. The hunter frowned, thinking it was one of the local kids fooling around in his barn. "Lando Goshen, what have you got those big eyes for?" he snapped, thinking the kids were trying to scare him with some crazy mask. "To see your grave," Rawhead rumbled very softly. The hunter snorted irritably and put his horse into the stall. "Very funny, the hunter said. When he came out of the stall, he saw Rawhead had crept forward a bit further. Now his luminous yellow eyes and his bear's claws could clearly be seen. "Lando Goshen, what have you got those big-ass furs?" he snapped. "You look ridiculous. Take your grave." Rawhead intoned softly. His voice a deep rumble that raised the hairs on the back of the hunter's neck. He stirred uneasily, not sure how the crazy kid and his dog should have made such a scary sound, if it really was a crazy kid. Feeling a little spooked. Geez, how long is this story? Oh, it's not that long. Okay. Feeling a little spooked, he hurried to the door and let himself out of the barn. Rawhead slipped out of the loft and climbed down the side. The barn behind him, with nary a rustle to reveal his presence. Rawhead raced through the trees and up the path to a large moonlight rock. He hid in the shadow of the huge stone, so that the only thing showing were his flaming yellow eyes, his bare claws, and his raccoon tail. When the hunter came level with the rock on the side of the path, he gave a startled yell. Staring at Rawhead, he gasped, "You nearly locked the heart right out of me, you crazy kid. Lando Goshen, what have you got that crazy tail for?" "To sweep your grave," Rawhead boomed, his enchanted voice echoing through the woods, getting louder and louder with each echo. The hunter took to his heels and ran for his cabin. He raced past the old well house, past the wood pile, over the rotting fence, and into his yard. But Rawhead was faster. When the hunter reached his porch, Rawhead leaped from the shadows and loomed above him. The hunter stared in terror up at Rawhead's gleaming yellow eyes and his ugly razorback hog's head, his bloody-boned skeleton with his long bare claws, sweeping raccoon's tail, and gleaming sharp panther teeth. "Lando Goshen, what have you got those big teeth for?" he gasped desperately, stumbling backwards from the terrible figure before him. "To eat you up, like you wanted to eat me!" Rawhead roared, descending upon the good-for-nothing hunter. The murdering thief gave one long scream in the moonlight. Then there was silence and the sound of crunching. Nothing more was ever seen or heard of the lazy hunter who lived on the ridge. His horse also disappeared that night, but sometimes folks would see Rawhead roaming through the forest in the company of his old friend Betty, and once a month, on the night of the full moon, Rawhead would ride the hunter's horse through town, wearing the old man's blue overalls over his bloody bones, with the hole cut out for his raccoon tail. In his bloody bear-clawed hands he carried his raw razorback hog's head, lifting it high against the full moon for everyone to see. And that was the story of Rawhead and Bloody Bones. Thank you for listening and watching.